Welcome to Strategic Management, Chapter 7, Part 2, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. This is Dr. J. Kent Gregory, and thank you for joining me. Well, we've just finished talking about the four stages or the several stages in the innovation process. Now, there are generally five phases to a product's life cycle. So this is after a product has already hit the market, and it's going to go through an introduction stage. So I'll pick up my thing, an introduction stage, and then a growth stage after it's in the market, a shakeout stage where similar products fall out of the market, or a series of products will fall out of the market. Then you get into maturity, and then finally decline. Now, why is this important? Well, depending upon the stages, or the phases rather, there'll be different consumers, different competitors, and then also different competencies that the product has, or that the company that's putting the product out has. Another thing to keep in mind is that the product can exist in two places at the same time. So it's almost like the quantum physics version of product life cycles. Well, for example, smartphones, they were in the introduction to growth stage in emerging economies in 2016. So places like India and other places, it was, introduction and growth. However, in 2016, at the same time, they were in the shakeout stage and maybe arguably the maturity stage in developed countries like the United States or Britain or other members of the EU. So phase one, introduction. So this is when the innovation is being introduced to the marketplace. And so the key elements of phase one are the following. It's capital intensive because a lot of money is moving into it to launch it, to develop the product or the process. And then there are first mover disadvantages. And by first mover, we mean the first product or process of its type to get into the marketplace. And that has disadvantages because one, have to establish the market. You have to convince customers of the validity of your product or the desirability of the product. You have to perfect the product. And then there are high unit costs because you haven't ramped up production yet. So the production you haven't necessarily achieved economies of scale. And then you also have to find the distribution and discover the appropriate distribution model. And that's going to be trial and error, as most things are anyway. So some examples of this would be home robots, self-driving cars, the Google Glass, which actually has kind of died, uh, and then things to think about. What other things are at the introduction phase right now? Phase two is growth. So the key elements of phase two, these tend to be the trendy products. So products that have made it to this stage are trendy, they're cool. This is where the industry standards are often set. Process innovation grows. So this helps the company that's producing the product or the process, or consulting process, if you will, helps them. This is where they figure out economies of scale, how to do things more efficiently. And there's non-price competition at this point because they're trading on the trendy aspect, and price really is being still established. So some examples of this are drones, although drones may be a little bit dated by now. Hybrid cars, probably dated. 3D or 4D televisions, and then others. So all of these examples here are probably dated. And so there's some other things that we can think about, particularly now that we're in this wonderful year of 2020. Phase three is the shakeout phase. This is where growth declines, competition grows, and then the weaker firms disappear. So slowing growth, diminishing returns, competition for market share. So now we're beginning to see elements of the red ocean. Price becomes more important and process improvement is key. But then, so why is that key? And this is one of the ways to achieve competitive advantage. So price is becoming more important. So the cheaper that you can make something, the greater value that you will create. So that's why process improvement, which implies, economies of scale and efficiencies. And then you're also getting industry consolidation. So some examples of this are streaming services, tablets, gourmet coffees, maybe home improvement shows. Phase four, maturity. Key elements of this phase, slowing growth. The focus is on process innovation and efficiencies to achieve that value. And then increased price competition, which is going to drive this. So this is going to be cyclical. Some examples of this, certainly mobile phones, maybe personal computers, air travel, maybe others. Phase five, decline. This is where the market size contracts and innovation is abandoned and competitors disappear. So shrinking customer demand, reduced market size, innovation and investment ends, and then strategies start turning to exit, harvest, maintain, and consolidate. So grabbing up your competitors maybe. Examples with this, well, declined DVD rentals, that's gone. Phone and phone lines. Cigarettes could be the case in the United States. And I think there are some other good examples that are worth considering here. So the other thing to keep in mind through here is when are the companies going to make the leap, if ever, to blue oceans? So blue oceans. And that might be a way to escape the dangers of phase 4 and 5. So what if a business does not adapt? Well, it won't adapt to the needs of the next customer group, and it won't bridge the chasm. So here are some examples. So chasm one, right here, failed to overcome some technical hurdles in commercialization. So you've already gotten some technology enthusiasts. Now you got to make the leap across the chasm to the early adapters. So for this, self-driving cars often have accidents. So that's a continuing technical hurdle. Chasm two, right here, perhaps the biggest one, fail to exhibit product practicality. So an example of one that has essentially failed this is the iWatch. It really doesn't add additional functionality for users. So that maybe has, well, certainly has made the failed to make the leap across the chasm. Maybe we should do it this way to the early majority. And then the third chasm up here, the failure to set standards and diminish product risk. So something here, BlackBerry failed to meet internet access standards. And when that happens and they can't make the leap across that final chasm, or frankly, for that matter, any of the chasms, the product will fail or stagnate. Well, thank you for joining me. And that is the end of part 2 of chapter 7.